Hi there. Welcome to The PrevenTable, the podcast giving you a seat at the table with conversations about the intersection of alcohol, drugs, and mental health in everyday lives. Take a seat and join us.
All right, y'all, we're digging in the weeds again. So if you remember, these are kind of some mini episodes where we talk specifically about cannabis, what's going on now that it's been passed for adult use, take topics, and get questions from you all, because there's a lot of questions, a lot of complications, a lot of head scratching around this. So very reluctantly, with me today, I have one of my favorite people in the entire world, Kelly Wieser. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Kelly is Prevent+Ed's Director of Education, and you've been with the organization for
14 years.
But before that, you were a teacher.
I was a teacher. I was a PE and health teacher. Traveled all over the Midwest and even in a little bit of Georgia to teach for a little bit, and couldn't find my way to stay in a classroom for a long period of time, a lot of one-year contracts. And
not through any fault of yours.
No, of course not. But I had met then NCADA through my bachelor's degree and knew about it as a service provider. And it took me 3 tries to get into the door here. And y'all are going to have to kick me out for me to leave.
Kids are your jam.
Yeah, they really are.
And just, to be really transparent, you sometimes don't love your current job because it keeps you out of the classroom.
That's a true statement. It's a true statement. I do. I love kids. I love the energy they bring. I feel more energized after being with them. Now, all teachers would say that they have some tough days and tough classes, that you'd feel exhausted when you leave. But for the most part, I know that Prevent+Ed and we as prevention educators have a part to play in a kid's future if they're willing to listen. And honestly, I feel like I learn more from the kids that I work with than I ever teach them.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
And you're a good teacher. I mean, you're a very good teacher. Did you always want to be a teacher?
No, I couldn't figure out what in the world I wanted to be. So, it was just kind of different paths that took me to it, and working with kids, working with different organizations over the years, like YMCA before and after care. Being a coach for over 10 years, it just kind of led me to it.
I wanted you to come on to answer the question we get a lot, which is, how do you talk to little kids about marijuana? And really the question is, you talk to little kids about marijuana? ? But I think that question, you talk to kids about marijuana or cannabis or weed or fill in the blank, I think that comes from not knowing that not only can you, but you really should be talking to kids. I would like you, if you don't mind, to talk a little bit about prevention education K through 4, and then what starts changing beginning in the 5th grade.
Yeah, we're not going into kindergarten classrooms and talking about weed. We're not.
Yeah.
It's not effective. It's inappropriate. But we can go and do lessons that would touch upon the fact that if you find something that you don't know what it is, don't drink it, don't ingest it, talk to a grown-up about what it is first. They have a lot of questions, even when our topics are the programs that we do that are resiliency skills, friendship skills, how to solve problems peacefully, how to interact with your teachers and your classmates, and how do you talk to yourself.
Because that's what we're teaching K through 4.
We're teaching those skills that really do lay the foundation to later on go and have some more serious conversation about substances. But it's about scaffolding those kids when they're younger so that they understand the importance of respecting other people, respecting their own bodies, their own brains, treating others the way that they want to be treated, so that they can surround themselves with friends who will be there for them when life gets hard. Because life is unfair, life is not easy, and we all need a support system to help us through those things. Well, if you're surrounding yourself with the kind of people who are like, hey, let's go take a walk to talk about this, or hey, would you like to play with me at recess today? Because I see you sitting by yourself. You're on the buddy bench. Let's go play. When you are able to talk kids through those skills, which, mind you, our amazing educators are already talking about these things. Their school counselors are helping set all of this up. We have the opportunity to come in as a visiting presenter, a visiting educator, to talk about some of the exact same things that those teachers and counselors are teaching about, but it's another face, it's another voice saying similar.
We have the
verbiage.
guest presenter effect, like novelty. Yeah.
And it's like, the poor teacher is sitting at their desk and they're looking at us. And I'm like, I just talked about this yesterday. And now they're listening to you and they're like, oh, yeah, totally in agreement. But it's about having multiple conversations about some of these things, maybe friendship skills, resiliency skills, but also it can be about medicines when they're younger. Mm-hmm. And about,
yummy and yucky things.
Yeah, what should you put in your body? What should you not? And again, if it's just kind of lying around, we tell toddlers that all the time. We like when they're picking something up off the carpet that's a mystery item and they're putting it in their mouth, we understand it's like biological and genetic for them to explore their worlds. But at some point, we as adults need to kind of guide them on what's a healthy choice and maybe an unhealthy choice. So we're not going in K through 4 and talking about those things, although we are questioned about those things.
Yes, we are. Mm-hmm.
And if we are questioned about those things, we give, a general answer, again, encouraging them to talk to their teachers, talk to their school counselors, talk to their grown-ups at home. But that in 5th grade is our very first level in most of our schools where we would go in and do a program that's called O to B Drug Free that gives basic information about your brain is amazing. Truly the boss.
It is the boss of your body.
That's right.
Yep.
And if you take good care of it, we hope that you'll live a long, healthy, happy life. And here are some things that could damage your brain or hurt your brain as you're growing and developing. Underage drinking, talking through other substances, nicotine, tobacco, vaping, which there are 3rd and 4th graders.
Absolutely.
Who know a lot more about these topics than adults sometimes realize. And sometimes it's because an adult in the home or maybe a grandparent or an aunt or uncle or somebody around them may be using certain substances, alcohol.
Which isn't bad.
We're not prohibitionists.
Right. Because a lot of times you'll have 5th graders, you'll say like, okay, who knows what alcohol is? Margaritas or whiskey. I'm like, they have no idea what that is. Right. But they know that when they go out to a Mexican restaurant, their adult usually gets a margarita. Mm-hmm. And they know it's like a two-hander situation. And they're like, I think there's tequila in that. But they don't know. They don't know how it impacts their body.
No,
they
in general, they do not. But they ask the questions of why adults would. And so we have to help them understand that their growing and developing brain is very different than an adult brain. And that it's okay for their grown-ups to use alcohol responsibly. Mm-hmm. That's not a problem. But in those lessons, we also talk, in general, for everyone to hear, if you are in situations where an adult around you is drinking alcohol or using a substance and they're changing their personality.
Just making you uncomfortable.
Yeah, right? You don't feel safe. It's like they're a different person, that they need to talk to another trusted adult about that situation in order to keep themselves safe. Mm-hmm. In 5th grade, they need to know how to keep themselves safe.
That's right.
And beyond.
That's right.
It's like we love for our 3rd graders to know how to keep themselves safe, and we talk about different things where they can. But when it comes to substances, those 5th graders really do see a lot, observe a lot, process a lot. And it's about them understanding that they're never alone. Mm-hmm. They have grown-ups at home who care about them, whether it's in a church setting, it's a family setting, neighborhood setting, their neighbors. It could also be that their school counselors, right, their principals, their teachers, or maybe a teacher they had 2 years ago that they have a really strong relationship with. Talk to someone.
A coach.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk to someone
about it. I do I guess not anymore. But when I used to do the O to B lessons, and when I would many times be doing them even like simultaneous to you, like you'd be doing one classroom, I'd be doing another classroom, we would always talk about how struck we were and are by the difference in 5th grade's knowledge. Like, especially I think when you come to the 3rd lesson, which is the cannabis lesson, because you show a picture a cannabis plant or of, some vehicles to use cannabis. And there are some kids that are like, oh yeah, that's a blunt and I know what that is. And I know people call that Mary Jane. And then you have other kids that are like, is that the same as a cigarette? Like what? Like, and have no idea. Like there's either kids who know a lot because they're watching, they're observing, they're reading, whatever. Or there are kids that like could not know less if their life depended on it.
Right. And when I introduce those lessons, it's like, hey, if you don't know anything about this at all,
it's okay.
We're going to make sure that you have a baseline of information so that you, again, in middle school, high school, you can make healthy choices around this for your body and your brain. If you know some things about this, I'm okay with that too. You are very smart people in 5th grade. You're very observant. You're not just a little kid. And so if you know some of this information, I'm not judging you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's perfectly fine. What I think is heartbreaking to me is when I go into those classrooms and you can kind of see those dynamics, but then you have a student volunteer information about how they have lost.
Yes.
A sibling, a parent, a grandparent, somebody else to...
Not to cannabis.
Not necessarily to cannabis, no, but to different substances.
Mm-hmm.
And if they haven't mentioned it in the first or second lesson, it's almost like it always comes out the third lesson.
It is true. It's true.
Because we talk about legality with them and what it means for things to be legal. And we help them understand that, the main difference between something being a legal substance versus an illegal substance is at some point there's harm that's caused. And when you say that word, it's like things open up for them because they've lived the harm.
That's right. And when you start talking about how the brain starts to change to need that substance to feel normal. And again, while we're not suggesting that people are dying from cannabis, it's usually when we start talking about drugs' impact on the brain that then you'll have those revelations, really, where somebody will say, like, I lost my mom last year to a fentanyl overdose. And now you have this 5th or 6th grader that knows what fentanyl is. And then you have 5th or 6th graders going, what is that word they're saying? And there's such a divide.
Mm-hmm. And to have some surface level conversations about the fact that, again, somebody who suffers from a substance use disorder is not a bad person.
Right. That's right.
And so I usually try to make that very clear the very first lesson we have.
Absolutely.
And I tell them, like, hey, some of you are going to see this information, hear this information, and again, you might know a little bit about it, but we're going to clear up any misinformation that's come along your way. And there's others of you in this audience that's going to touch a little bit differently because you live this every day. And so we as educators have to sometimes walk a tightrope in making sure that we always bring it back to this information is meant for you so that you can grow up making healthy choices around these topics, understanding that if people kind of veer off track and are making some unhealthy choices around this, that doesn't mean they're stuck there. Mm-hmm. That there are people and resources and organizations out there that can help. We want to offer you this information so that if someone in your life is struggling with these things, that it's not you in the future.
Right. Like I always say, like, I care deeply about what's going on in your family, but I really care about what's going on with you. And so even though somebody else in your family might be doing these things or struggling with these things, like, I'm focused on you. Because I think so often people think that if their mom or dad, has struggled or their siblings have struggled, that that's just what's going to happen to them. And whether that's with alcohol or whatever substance. And so I think that is so critical to emphasize that. I wonder what you would say, because we get this question a lot. Well, could you come in to 7th grade and do like an assembly on marijuana? Because, all of our kids are smoking marijuana. So could you just do an assembly? We just think that would be great. Like, just come in, we'll put everybody in the gym, sit them on some benches, talk to them.
Yeah, I remember myself listening. Or should I say maybe not listening or struggling to listen with the assemblies. It's really not effective. The outcomes that you get from those kind of presentations, while they can be impactful for some people in the audience. Absolutely. If you look at the impact that you can make, you will impact less kids, students, people if you are in a large group presentation. Because if there are questions, kids are going to shy away from that sometimes. They don't want to be judged with what their question is. And if you are in a classroom setting of a class of 24, 28, 32, whatever it may be, kids are more comfortable. They feel like you have set up a more trusting environment and that they can ask questions. And let's face it, an assembly is a one-time thing where a speaker might talk for 40 minutes, 45 minutes, maybe an hour. But then it's kind of like I am just shoveling information at them. It's not a conversation. There's no like participation in that necessarily. And so in a classroom setting, we can offer up questions that are open-ended, to have them think for a couple minutes maybe by themselves and maybe share their ideas with somebody who's sitting next to them or at their pod. And then, okay, so we need 5 ideas from what you came up with. Okay, you can use your answer or steal one from one of the people in your pod, but we need to share out at least 5 ideas of healthy choices somebody can make instead of engaging in substances or
Ways
smoking weed or whatever. Exactly.
That aren't just saying no. Like,
yeah.
What? And then you give them homework and you come back the next week.
Yes.
And in a perfect world, we would see kids from kindergarten through 12th grade, right? Yeah. Just like happens in Rittner and some other school districts, because we don't teach kids to read in 1 year of their life. So we certainly can't teach them all the effects of substances in 1 year of their life and expect them to carry that information forever and ever and ever. That just doesn't work, and that's not what we do with any other skill.
Right. So if we're only going and talking to them for a 45-minute period in an assembly where they're catching some of the information, or if I'm going and doing a one-time presentation, or if I'm going and doing multiple presentations, but I'm only talking at one grade level and they're not getting consistent reinforcement of information down the road when they're actually facing some of these issues and some of these pressures, it's not as effective. And kids do feel alone, and they feel like in order to fit in, they might feel as if they need to engage in some of these behaviors. Whereas if you can reinforce making healthy choices, being an individual, celebrating your uniqueness throughout their schooling, again, echoing all the amazing thing that teachers and coaches and school counselors are talking with them over the years, then it's more effective. It's produces healthier kids.
So the answer to the question, well, can you just come in and do an assembly? Short answer is no.
No.
Okay. So what is the answer to the question, how do I bring your programs to my school?
That can be more than just a quick conversation.
Exactly. So
because,
what would happen in that situation?
Right. If I get a phone call from a school asking for us to come in, I might have to ask them, well, why do you want us to come in? What are some things that you would like for us to address? What are some issues that are happening that you're seeing? It's much better for us to come in earlier and have conversations in a preventative sense or with prevention education than for it to ever be reactionary. Mm-hmm. It's still okay to have reactionary programming come in after something has happened because people need to understand resources and things that are available to them. But if you can plant those seeds earlier, the better. But if I'm on the phone with an administrator or a counselor or whoever, I'm asking some questions of them first. Mm-hmm. What are some things that you want to address? And then as we go through and figure out, well, maybe they're having kids coming to school and they're with carts or other vape pens and a lot of suspensions that we have to talk to them about. Okay, yes, we can come in and talk to that age group that seems to be having some issues. Absolutely. But it would behoove us to not just talk about that substance that you think is an issue. Let's back it up a little bit. And again, kind of as we said before, let's talk about the brain development, talk about the risks of an adolescent using these substances versus an adult. And, try to maybe even get programming in earlier to address these things before they can be an issue.
Because let's be really crystal clear that we have elementary schools that are reporting, that they're meeting the kiddos at the school drop off and the door opens and the kid reeks of weed, or the kid comes to school smelling like cannabis, or a parent shows up under the influence at a parent-teacher conference or something like that. Like, elementary kids are being impacted also, not just because somebody's eating an edible. That gets a lot of traction, but that is less common than teacher opens the door and gets a whiff of cannabis as they're, escorting the kid into school. So to your point, like, we really want to begin early. And yes, of course, we want to talk to you if you've had a situation where 7 of your students have eaten an edible and the news are on alert and the parents are on alert. Of course, we want to help with that, with early intervention like our guided program and elementary. But also, let's get upstream. Or maybe you're a high school and we want to promote the It's Complicated program, which Emma and Kane had talked about.
Yes.
But really it's a dialogue with the school.
It's a dialogue, but it's also multi-layered. It's not just putting it on the kids. It's also about having parent presentations. It's also about educating school staff.
That's right.
Whether it be in a meeting after school or before the school year starts, these are some warning signs, or these are some things to look for. These are pictures of devices and things so that they're aware of what to look for, and allowing them to ask questions too, because so many times our teachers and counselors and principals are spinning their wheels with some of these situations, because as soon as one product is addressed or one thing is addressed, man, here comes another one.
They're playing whack-a-mole.
Yeah, they absolutely are. And we will not suspend our way out of this problem. And I know that sometimes that seems to be the most effective and only option that people have. But, yesterday I was at the Jefferson County Mental Health Summit, and I listened to a principal at one of the Jefferson County high schools talking through that one of the things that seemed to be effective for his group of kids being suspended for vaping, and whether it was nicotine vapes or it was carts for THC, was to have a choice. Mm-hmm. You can be suspended for so many days, or have you and a grown-up parent, guardian, come in and let's have an informational seminar about these things happening. Well, oftentimes we're asked to come in and provide that information. Mm-hmm. And so it's it's a family issue. It is not just a student issue. So the adults have to be informed that, hey, the weed of today is not the weed of old. Mm-hmm. It is just so much more potent than it was ever before. And so if they remember smoking weed in high school, it is not the same thing as what it is today. And it's very tough for our schools because they are put in the place where they have to address this. Mm-hmm. And it's they have to address it now. And they don't always have the resources. They don't have the time to do that. And they're worried about their students. Yeah. It's not just because the principals want to suspend kids. It's because they are concerned about them. Mm-hmm. They understand the lifelong implication that can happen with weed, potentially with some of the students. And they want to try to get ahead of it as much as possible. So if they're asking us for it, we can come in and do a classroom presentation. Better off, let's do a series. Let's talk about the brain. Let's talk about how other substances impact it, and then let's have a real down and dirty with the impact of weed, because everything that they're hearing on TikTok, everything that they're hearing on all of our other social media platforms, what they're hearing in their neighborhoods, what anecdotally people, family members are sharing with them about why they do it and how it's no big deal. That's some misinformation in there. We need to bust through some myths for them to have them understand, well, that might be a 40-year-old person talking to you, but you were in middle school. Mm-hmm. You were in high school.
And best case scenario, we do a series with a staff meeting and a parent presentation.
Absolutely. And then you know what? We bebop back next year.
Right.
And because all of our programs are age appropriate and diversified in terms of information, we'll come back and talk about these topics again, because these are the topics that are impacting kids' lives the most, statistically speaking. But we're going to do it in a different way.
Yep.
We're going to have different activities. We're going to ask different questions. And we're going to dive deeper because they're older.
They're older.
And
they're more mature.
They've watched more movies. They've listened to more music. All those kind of things. Well, And it's like those activities and those lessons have to connect with kids. And I think what we try to do, and I would say that we do pretty well, is we review our curriculum every single year, sometimes twice a year.
Mm-hmm.
And if something is not working, or it feels old or stale, or it feels like we're using lingo that the kids aren't using anymore,
Right.
we are the ones that have to adapt.
Yeah.
And to meet them where
That's
they're
right.
at.
That's
and
right.
I think that we try to stay ahead of the game that way. And as I said before, like I learn a lot from my students. Sometimes we make adaptations to our curriculum or lingo based on what we learn in the classroom and what students share with us. So it's a give and take with the whole goal of information being offered to them that hopefully will help them live a long, healthy, happy life.
I love you. And you're the best person to talk about this and the best person to lead the prevention education department because you live it. Like, education is in your blood. Now that you're a parent, you like see it. You are a teacher. You talk like a teacher. You act like a teacher. You are a teacher. Like, you are a teacher. You're the teacher that somebody wishes that they had. Like, I just thank you so much for coming and talking about this topic. I think that we know that elementary prevention education is confusing for a lot of people. People don't quite understand what it is that we're talking about, what it is that we're not talking about, why we're talking about it. Why isn't that just left to the homes? Well, we know that not everybody has the information that is correct and accurate, and we're giving that, and we're grateful to the schools that invite us in year after year.
And the funders who provide the money to provide this to schools, where schools don't have to pay for this.
Exactly.
Because if they had to pay for it, they wouldn't be able to,
right.
to implement it.
That's right. Thank you for digging in the weeds with me. And thank you for doing your job. I know that you're not in the classroom as much as you want. And I'm sorry for that, but gosh darn it, you are so good at explaining what it is and why we do it, and talking with those administrators.
Well, thanks to you and all the people who have come before me to, or for laying the groundwork and honestly setting us up with programs that are effective.
Our programs are really good.
Can really help support our kids as they grow through some of the toughest years of their life.
Ugh, true. All right, you all know the drill. If you liked what you heard, join us for the next In the Weeds mini episode. Consider rating, reviewing, and subscribing to any of our podcasts. Thank you so much, Kelly, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us at The PrevenTable, brought to you ad-free by Prevent+Ed. Prevent+Ed works to reduce or prevent the harms of alcohol and other drug use through education, intervention, and advocacy. Please visit their website at PreventEd.org. Like what you heard? Rate, review, and subscribe to stay up to date with what we are serving on The PrevenTable.